Chapter 6 of Nip and Tuck by a Self-Made Man. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 6, in which Nip lays a trap for broker Redstone. After Tuck got rid of his COD stock, it still continued to rise slowly, until it finally touched 121, and the boy figured that he might have easily made $15,000 more if he had held on a week longer. "I don't care," he remarked to himself as he scanned the high water record reached the previous day by COD. "I've made a good haul out of it. The man who is hoggish and reaches out for the last cent generally gets caught when the bottom falls out, and then he has nothing to blame for his ruin but his greed. 110 is a pretty good figure for the stock to reach, even under the circumstances, and I could not afford to run any more risk of getting on the toboggan and sliding back." During the week, the continued strength of COD around 121 held the market good and stiff, and the lambs cavorted around the financial district in a state of high glee, for most of them had made money in the recent rise. What the syndicate at the Bank of COD was doing no one seemed to know, though many of the wise ones believed the members of the combination were quietly unloading on the public at an enormous profit. Tuck himself, believing that the boom was good for a couple of weeks longer at any rate, took a flyer at A, B, and C at 60, buying 1,000 shares outright, for which, of course, he paid the full sum of $60,000. "I've no margin to be wiped out, at any rate. That's one satisfaction," he said as he put the stock away in his safe. "The market is too high for me to take any desperate chances for a big winning. As soon as this stock goes up 5 points, I'll sell out." It went up to 64 7/8 by Monday, and Tuck was standing by his indicator with his hat on, waiting for it to go up the remaining fraction of a point, when the first signs of the impending slump of the stock market began suddenly to appear on the tape in the shape of a sharp decline of COD. The instrument began to click furiously. Other stocks also began to show a falling off, and the next quotation of A, B, and C indicated a drop to 64.5. "Gee!" exclaimed Tuck. "I'm afraid this looks squally." It might have been fancy, but from that moment the sharp click of the indicator seemed to have taken on a different tone. As a matter of fact, it is asserted that there is a difference in tone in the little instrument between the rising and falling market. One accustomed to notice it can tell the tendency of prices by the sound alone without examining the tape. When prices are advancing, it has a sort of joyous tone. Quotations are made with frequent pauses between, but the ticking is confident and pleasing. When things are panicky, sales are made with great rapidity, and the ticking is nervous and without cessation. Tuck watched the tape in hopes that the slump might only be a temporary one, but as time went on there did not seem to be any improvement in the outlook. He rushed over to the gallery of the stock exchange, and when he got there, he found a crowd of more or less excited spectators looking down on a seething mob of howling brokers on the floor, who seemed to have all at once gone mad. "But gee!" cried the boy, "I believe the bottom has really dropped out and things are going to the dogs." The excitement had extended to the street brokers. Tuck offered his 1,000 shares of A, B, and C at 64, and then 63 7/8, and so on down to 60 before he got a buyer. "By George, I guess I'm lucky to get out of that," he said as he handed a memorandum to the other broker and then hurried back to his office. And Nip, what had he been doing the past week? Don't mention it. Nip was in his glory. He had scooped in $102,000 on 3 deals, which had resulted in a loss of $35,000 to Jarvis Redstone, and $23,000 between brokers Green and Brown, that gentleman's particular friends. Nip was simply tickled to death over the transactions, not only because he had more than doubled his capital, but because he had been successful in getting back at Redstone for the kindergarten insult to himself and Tuck the day they moved into the building and began business as stockbrokers. And this was how the scheme worked itself out. The morning of the day COD touched 110, at which figure Tuck sold out his holding in the stock, Nip was coming up in the elevator of the New Era building along with brokers Green and Redstone, neither of whom had been very friendly with him after they found that they could not unload on him a lot of stock that remained a dead issue with them. He heard the former say to Green that in his opinion COD had reached its limit, and would surely go down, at least to the neighborhood of par within a day or so. "Gee," muttered the boy as he walked into his office. "Redstone seems to be mighty positive that COD is going to take a slump. I wonder if somebody on the inside has given him a tip, or whether he's simply figured out the matter in his own mind. If I had something definite to rely on, I'd like to call him on that. I'd give something to do him up to the tune of a few thousands, just to let him see that a kindergarten broker isn't such an easy proposition after all." The more Nip thought about it, the more eager he was to get at his more experienced adversary. "I think I'll run over and see Mr. Billings. If anybody should know about the prospects of COD, he's the man, seeing he's on the inside and is the confidential broker for the clique that has been booming the stock. The old man likes me pretty well. Perhaps he'll give me a pointer on the situation." Nip, after he had attended to such business as he had on hand, put on his hat and went over to Billings and Company's office, a quarter of a block away. Broker Billings was just on the point of starting for the exchange. He called Nip into his sanctum and asked him what he could do for him. "Mr. Billings, I'd like to ask you a question about COD stock." "All right," answered the big broker. "I'm ready to listen to you." "Do you think the stock will go much higher than present quotations?" "Are you thinking of buying some of it at this stage of the game?" asked the broker, looking hard at his former employee. "To be perfectly frank with you, Mr. Billings, I'm on the warpath for the scalp of a certain broker who offered a gracious insult to me and my friend Tuck the first day we began business. He intimated that if any more amateur brokers like us came into the street and tried to buck against the regular fraternity, he thought it would be a proper thing for the exchange to start a kindergarten school for our benefit." "He said that, did he?" laughed Billings. "Yes, sir, and it would do me a heap of good to show him that an amateur broker, as he reckons us, can take a fall out of him, with all his years of experience in the market." "Do you object to telling me the name of the broker who made this remark?" "Certainly not. It was Jarvis Redstone, who has an office on the same floor with me." Mr. Billings pursed up his lips and stroked his mustache. He knew Redstone very well indeed, and he did not like him. "Well, what are you thinking of doing to get square, as you call it?" Redstone told Green this morning in the elevator as they were coming up, I was in the cage just back of them, that he was positive COD was getting top-heavy at 110, and it was his opinion that the stock could go no higher, but rather would slide back to about par at the end of the week. "He thinks so, does he?" said Billings with a twinkle in his eye. "So I should judge from his remarks," replied Nip. "Now, if I had a good idea that COD would go up a bit further, instead of going down the next week, I'd try to purchase a 7-day option on the stock from him, and if my calculations prove correct, Redstone would be apt to come out at the small end of the horn." Broker Billings regarded the bright boy for a minute or two without speaking. "And you think this is the right shop to come to for a tip, eh, Nip?" he said with just the suspicion of a smile. "It is a pretty valuable article to give away, don't you think? And some people might consider you had a good nerve to come in here and ask for such information." "That's right, sir," admitted the boy, looking a bit foolish as he began to consider the matter in the proper light. "Look here, Nip. I've taken a great interest in you and like to see you get along. If you solemnly assure me that whatever hint I may give you will go no further than yourself, I don't mind furnishing you with a little ammunition to fight your friend Redstone. You can depend on my word, Mr. Billings." "I think I can," replied the broker confidently. "You were the best junior clerk I ever had, and it was against my wishes and advice that you branched out for yourself. But since you've done so, I wish to encourage you all I can." "Well, thank you, Mr. Billings." "Then, if I were you, I'd risk a 7-day option on COD, but not a day longer. Do you understand?" Rising to his feet. "I'm very grateful to you for the hint, sir." "Don't mention it. Good day." "It is clear that things are not fully ripe yet in COD," said Nip to himself as he walked back to his own office. "It's good for a week yet if some screw doesn't come loose in the plans of the bull clique back of it. I'll call on Redstone and see what I can do with him. Oh, if I can only catch him napping, won't it be a good joke for Wall Street?" With his hat on the back of his head, Nip entered Broker Redstone's office. He was invited to enter the private room. "Well, my little man, what can I do for you?" asked the burly broker patronizingly as he looked at his young visitor like a big fat spider might a poor little fly which had entered his web. To call Nip a little man, as if he were a child, was adding insult to injury, and the boy's eyes flashed for a moment, but he curbed his resentment, trusting that the opportunity was at hand for him to square scores with the big man. "I came in to inquire if you have any COD stock on hand." "Not a share, but I guess I can get you some if you want it very bad. Do you want any?" "That will depend on the price." "It's a rather scarce article nowadays, but I guess I can accommodate you with 1,000 shares at 111. "It closed at 110 last night on the board," said Nip. "I know it did, but I guess it'll go higher today," he replied craftily. "Well, I don't want any today, Mr. Redstone, but I'll tell you what I'll do. I want a 7-day option on 5,000 shares at 110. What'll you charge me for it?" 5,000 shares?" exclaimed Redstone, raising his eyebrows in surprise. "Yes, sir." "And you want to buy a 7-day option?" "That's what I said." "Well, my little man, pay me $2,500 cash, and you shall have it," said the broker, looking at Nip as if he regarded him as a good thing. "Very well," replied the boy quietly, rising from his chair. "Please write out a receipt for the money and prepare the option. I'll be back with the cash in a moment." Redstone nodded and watched the boy out of the corner of his eye as he retired. "This is a chance I've been waiting for," grinned the broker to himself. "In 7 days or less, COD will be nesting around par. What a cinch." End of chapter 6.